What's going on, everyone? My name's Mac. I'm coming to you guys with another video. Today I'm coming to you guys with another episode of To Be Human, which I planned to do yesterday, but I just didn't feel that good, so I'm giving this video another shot. But in this video, we're talking about the second point on the list of things that I feel are innate features of being human. Which is having no control over yourself because modern pleasures are crude and addictive. So what does that mean? Well, crude meaning unrefined, which means we kind of just make shit and put it out there, and if it has an effect, we don't really care of the intensity, but we don't really care that it may have varying effects, and often they end up being addictive. But this doesn't just go for uh, your everyday prescription drug or things that are naturally considered addictive. This goes under modern pleasures. So the human condition is one in which where you kind of bounce back and forth between um, pain and pleasure, and it kind of has varying levels of intensity, and it's a nonstop sway back and forth. But in this case, the case I'm making is that modern pleasures, at least, I say modern pleasures because I believe this can be reworked, but it wouldn't be the external pleasures. It would be the internal way that we respond to them that would need to be changed. But the problem is right now is that we make things far too intense to the point where it sort of infects our mind. But I'll get into the bullet points so I stop uh, bouncing around so I can give a more clearer picture. Um, so the first bullet point here is blood flow glucose cannot consistently flood to the parts of the brain that would be required to accomplish your full potential. So obviously there's things you could accomplish that um, you could accomplish these things if you were to stick to them over extended periods of time. But that would require only one part of your brain consistently getting the blood flow over the other parts. And that can't completely exist because of the ancestral aspect of the brain. It's from a much different time. Basically, the modern environment we live in, it didn't evolve with this environment. This environment evolved rapidly. Like mostly everything we have came in the last 100 years. I think just 100 years ago there was like only what 2 billion people or something along those lines. So a lot of things have rapidly came about in the last 100 years. So don't make the mistake of thinking your brain is suited for this environment. That is extremely false. And the thing is mostly nobody considers that factor in a decision-making process. But basically, uh, it's exactly that. So the parts of the brain, like the more advanced, fresh parts, like um, the prefrontal cortex, can't consistently get the blood flow over the more ancestral parts, like the limbic system. And because of this, you have issues with modern pleasures. It could be anything such as social media is a perfect example of. It's not really something that people can tame or have much of a battle with. I mean, the only real battle is just to not have it, which you'll hear some people say, "Oh, I don't have that social media, X, Y, or Z input, X, Y, or Z there." But as far as indulging in the stimuli and expecting you to be able to control yourself 100% of the time over that stimuli, you'd be wrong. And you'll find this to be a consistent feature of being human. We have here the next point. The human mind is too ancestral and engineered for short-term rewards. It's exactly that. So your brain is going to prioritize pissing off on Twitter for 15, 20, 25 minutes uh, every, once in a while rather than consistently reading the book you said you wanted to finish in, 1 week or whatever it was, but, it's not rewarding you enough. And that's getting to the main point here. So a lot of the things that we've designed to be pleasurable, like social media, video games, or anything else, the problem isn't the things. I mean, a lot of the time we don't even do them because they're addictive, right? We do them because it's part of who we are. It's something that we genuinely like for what it is. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the problem is that it just so happens to be that the thing that we really, like I said, maybe even attribute to being a part of your identity. So it's not, it doesn't have anything to actually do with the crude and addictive part, but it just so happens to be crude and addictive, that thing. Because humans have a hard time engineering things that work perfectly with their brains. They just would rather have an effect. So they give people morphine after surgery, they end up giving a little bit too much. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, not so much that there's a physiological response, but mentally it blows your shit out. Probably more than you would need. For example, yesterday I was nauseous and I took this Zofran or whatever it was. I really don't ever take medicine, but I was extremely nauseous, and I got a incredible migraine when I came out of it. That just shows that the pill most likely overdid itself in the initial phase, and then when it came off, it rocked you like a truck. So that's sort of the problem in it, but that's the inverse. That's the pain. Now take that and do the opposite. For example, video games. Um, Such a basic thing. It's not going to kill you. All it really does is sap time, but they're so addictive unconsciously that you're going to prioritize them in the short term over a separate goal. And it's not to say that that thing is bad. It's just that mostly everything that gives pleasure on this planet, since it's so unrefined, and that's unrefined in comparison to the human mind. Um, at least we're not making it with the human mind in mind. If that makes sense. Um, but since it's so unrefined, it tends to be overly pleasurable than we need it to or would prefer it to be. So I would argue that a lot of the modern pleasures on this planet are 80 to 100 times more intense than they would need to be. Now, what am I using for this basis? I'm using what is a simple process in which humans are supposed to feel pleasure, in my opinion, or how to say it. This is really the comparison, okay? So compare your ability to set a goal, attain a goal, and then feel pleasure from that goal. So specifically those three things. You have to set a goal, right, that's out of reach. You don't have it yet. Go and attain the goal, and then your brain will give you pleasure for that goal. Now, when you compare that pleasure, even if it was something difficult, like let's say you really suck at, a certain thing, like getting homework done, you know, unless it's at the last minute. So you made a goal to finish it, before the day it was due. So maybe 3 days before it was due. Even if you go and attain that goal and your brain gives you pleasure for that goal, what I'm arguing here, my case for this point here, is that if like you were to go on social media, that would be 80 to 100 times more pleasurable than the pleasure you'd get from that goal. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say is we have created things that are overly pleasurable and that they end up being addictive because of this. And it's not so much the things that are bad, it's more the fact that our brains cannot actually handle the things. And so you would ask, well, what do I do about it? Just not indulge in any modern pleasures? Well, no. I would argue mostly all modern pleasures are crude and addictive compared to the process of setting a goal, attaining a goal, and getting pleasure from the goal. I think the only time that that system worked was ancestrally or far long ago, like where setting a goal was to find shelter, like the basic needs. Once you go past that, um we almost definitely have engineered something or some way to invest. I mean, people have. This is not just a new process. This is even pleasures, hundreds of years ago could fall under this category. Like I was watching this thing of this guy who hunted 250,000 animals in his lifetime. Like, there's no way you can't call that crude and addictive. Like, the effect that hunting is having on his brain definitely inhibited his ability to set a goal. Like, I'm talking like look, humans technically have the ability to be like drones in the sense that like we could literally set any goal that was actually attainable, go after that thing because it's possible due to the laws of physics, our capabilities, etc., and then attain pleasure from that thing and live only off that pleasure to accomplish everything. And that would be enough. We could just be like drones accomplishing shit around the clock. But what I'm arguing is that we can't because of all the other modern pleasures that have been invented. They're overly intense. You see what I'm saying? So let's go through a lot of the other bullet points to support this main thing I'm trying to make a case for, which I still feel as if I could explain this better, but I also don't think I've done that bad. Humans engineer various substances and stimuli that have overly intense effects on some people. That's another thing is that it changes depending on the person. So if you go to the store, I always use pills as an example, but again, I'm referring to almost everything. I mean, I even referred to hunting as overly intense. So the thing is but if you use a pill as an example, a doctor prescribes everyone the same pill, it's going to have way too high of an effect on some people and way too low of an effect on other people. So it is in part the fact that like when they make a Dorito or engineer a Dorito, for example, to be highly addictive, they're just doing it sort of like shooting a dart at a dartboard. They just want it to be pleasurable enough for enough people, but then it turns out to be insanely intense to some people who just have eat Doritos around the clock and get fat off them. So really there is enough things made on this planet for everyone to have at least one modern pleasure that is crude and addictive on their mind, that inhibits their ability to set goals, attain goals, and obtain pleasure from those goals. Anything that has an effect on that should fall under this category, and everybody has something like that. If the pleasure from goals inside of your own head isn't enough, then that means there's most likely an external force that is, having too high of an intensity on your mind. And that's the thing is we've all felt it. We've all ate a donut or we've all like indulged in some kind of stimuli that is already far too intense on our minds for us to ever feel satisfied from setting a goal, attaining a goal, and obtaining pleasure from the goal. There's no way. I mean, even if you're 7 years old, you felt something that's more intense than the pleasure you're going to get from obtaining a goal. You see what I'm trying to say? So it's a flaw in the human mind, and not to mention a lot of things are just overtly intense. Uh, so is it a question of these things being too intense, or is it a question of the system in which we obtain pleasure from goals being too weak? I can't answer that, but I can say that this is a subset, or this is a part of being human for sure. Is that there's always other stimuli that's getting in the way of whatever thing you might want, and that's just how it is. It's not like a lot of this stuff is killing you. I'm talking about stuff that doesn't even have health effects. I'm just saying complete mental effects here with this video. Most things that give off some pleasure often give off too much pleasure due to how susceptible the human mind is to stimuli. Yeah, I mean, I've honestly explained a lot of these bullet points just through rambling. Aside from the constant stolen attention, there is a relatively high probability that you develop an uncontrollable connection to certain stimuli, with your unconscious mind developing the inability to resist said stimuli. That's true. I mean, it's not really even the same part of the brain that wants the goal that's going after the stimuli. If your goal is to read, 52 books this year, one per week, And then 21 weeks in, you remember how fun it was to start knitting, and then you just get carried away with that. Like I said, humans technically have the ability to be drone-like in the sense that they could just non-stop go after goals. But as I said, the problem is the human mind, it runs off neurotransmitters and it needs constant replenishing of these. And you're not going to be getting enough firing of certain neurotransmitters from obtaining goals compared to the modern stimuli, insert whatever here, pick your poison. It's whatever, and it's endless. And yeah, that's exactly it. Um, Due to pleasurable stimuli being overly intense, it makes long-term payouts a constant battle with your subconscious brain because decisions will be made prioritizing the intense stimuli over the pleasure from obtaining the long-term goal. Yeah, that sums it up pretty much the best right there. So, to revisit the original point I'm making here, and I'm not trying to make it seem like everyone's an addict. I'm trying to make it seem like everyone cannot override the unconscious part of their brain. I mean, the thing is you might as well consider that a part of you. You know, people want to say, well, whoa, there's two me's in my head. Well, really, it's just one you, but there's two opposing parts of you. And, sometimes one is stronger than the other, and that's just that. But, if you're only considering the conscious part of you, then yeah, there would be two yous in your head, but you have to be careful with that. It can get pretty schizo pretty quick. Um, Going back to the original point here, having no control over yourself because modern pleasures are crude and addictive. Now, I'm not saying this rids you of responsibility to be a fuck up, to be lazy, to be obese, to let yourself go. Uh, what I am saying is that it's completely understandable. What you really kind of want is not your ability. You don't want a simple measure for your ability to set goals and obtain the goals. You sort of want statistical data on how good you are at setting goals and attaining goals when some other infectious modern pleasure didn't influence the outcome at all. Now, I would argue that very few goals you set, you don't run into some kind of hindrance due to modern pleasures. And even if, let's say you actually didn't run into any at all, it might still always be doomed because you felt what it's like to be on social media before or some other addictive stimuli. And because you felt it before, even being in a vacuum away from all those pieces of stimuli, um, your brain still can't respond to goals normally how it was meant to. And like I said, I say how it was meant to, but really it's how it was meant to many, many, many years ago. This system of the brain really needed to be updated with time because it was not prepared for the stimuli we were going to end up engineering. And now we live in a hellhole where it's really hard for anyone to stay focused. Everyone has ADHD now and all this other bullshit, but really, it's just that our brains weren't made for this world. That's all. And back to the responsibility point, I'm not saying that this is a reason for ridding yourself of responsibility. I'm not saying that this justifies you, like I said, slacking on your goals. I'm simply saying there is going to be times where these things just pull you away from your goals. And that is just part of being human. And it's not I don't want to I don't okay, it's really not your fault because to do you're trying to do something with a brain that isn't from the time, and it's just tough. It's tough. I'm big on taking responsibility, so when someone starts talking about this being a responsibility argument, this can get tricky. Um it's not your fault that modern pleasures are overly pleasurable. It's just it's just how it is. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what this series is about. Is just like this is just the way life is. You can detox, you can get away from things, but it's not going to change the fact that if you want a hit of pleasure, you're going to get way more than you need, and that is going to have an adverse effect on your ability to accomplish goals, which is what, really, which is what life should all be about, which is self-building and, you know, that whole thing. Um, my case is that it's not so easy because of the unrefined aspect of modern pleasures. But yeah, I think that covered most of it. This is um, this was a bit more of an abstract. Uh, this was a bit more of an abstract video. I'd like to hear you guys' opinion on it, or how you would improve the explanation of it, because perhaps it could have been conveyed in a more refined manner. But yeah, until next time.